sheet, a sign-up sheet that was, those of you who indicated you wanted to testify when you came in the room, I'll just call you in the order that you signed up, and then we will move to folks who are hearing via Zoom who also want to testify. And if there's anybody who has not yet indicated that they do want to speak, just let myself or Anthony here in the corner know, and we'll be sure you have an opportunity. So with that, I will ask Shelley McGuire to please rise and sure.
I also printed copies.
Hold the mic up.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Shelley McGuire. I work for Maine Farmland Trust. And I am the policy and research director here. So I'm glad to be sort of weighing in support of this implementation plan and have some comments that I'd like to share. I'll try to be brief. And I also passed out like some written feedback if you're interested in diving in deeper and learning about our thoughts. So for the past several years, Maine Farmland Trust has been deeply engaged in a very strong and collaborative response to the challenge of PFAS contamination on Maine farms and farmland. And we're grateful to have participated over the last several months in 3 of the 4 PFAS fund advisory subcommittees that have worked to define how the fund will be used. Maine's experience has demonstrated that while the presence of PFAS in our soils, waters, crops, and livestock is deeply alarming, especially to impacted farmers, the discovery of contamination on a farm does not always mean the end of farming for every impacted farm if there's adequate support that it exists. So the provision of technical assistance and financial support, including releasing farmers from debt obligations to contaminated land and advancing research are absolutely crucial to keep farms in business. There are 3 main goals that have informed our PFAS response and would shape our support for the pieces of the implementation plan that we are particularly satisfied to see included. First and foremost, Maine must do right by its farmers, the people who feed us and drive an important part of Maine's economy and who are being impacted by decisions made decades ago. We appreciate how the implementation plan includes strategies to do right by Maine's farmers, such as by addressing broad and ongoing farmer healthcare needs, offering financial supports, technical assistance, relief from debt obligations, per acre compensation payments for farmers that want to stay on their land but take their contaminated land out of production, and much more. Secondly, the safety net absolutely must be farmer-centered. It must be easy to access, implemented efficiently, quickly, and with opportunities for farmer feedback embedded in its implementation. We're pleased to see strategies in the draft implementation plan that reflect this goal. Things like the navigator positions are really wonderful in advancing this farmer-centered approach. Likewise, the option for farmers to access a roster of experts as well as find their own service provider and then be reimbursed for using that provider. We think that that goes a long way towards making the fund easy to use for farmers. And probably most importantly, compensating farmers for their time spent responding to the contamination of their land, which is not their fault. Third, let's support response strategies that don't write off Maine's contaminated farmland forever. In a state that's already losing thousands of acres of farmland to development pressures, we support the implementation plan's strategies that increase the likelihood that affected farmland can return to agriculture in the future. In particular, remediation research is really in its infancy, and we must invest in this research now if we're going to see potential solutions within the next few decades. Lastly, there is a suggestion that we have that would make the implementation of the fund even more farmer-centered. The idea is that sort of cross-cutting the fund implementation, we suggest creating a formal mechanism for proactively and systematically collecting and integrating the feedback of farmers as fund implementation goes on. That may have been in the plan and I just missed it, but I didn't see it there. And it's wonderful that like Beth's email address is on the DACF website. I think the navigators will be able to receive feedback, but we still think that something more systematic is needed so that fund implementation can be adapted according to the feedback received, and that will allow for the fund to address any potential gaps that may exist that we just can't foresee right now at this point. So thank you so much for the opportunity to provide testimony. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have.
Thank you, Shelley. Next is John O'Donnell.
That's what you get for showing up early. They call you early. I hadn't wanted to do this, but I sold my farm 7 years ago, so I'm an ex-farmer, but I drive a lot around the state and like a lot of people, and here I am going off topic, so I have to be careful, but like a lot of people, it's hard not to notice the abandoned farms and the fields. Anyway, there's two suggestions I'd like to make. Number one, I don't see any funds devoted to hiring an independent investigator to review why such inconclusive studies linking PFAS to illness has caused the hysterical and predatory responses by Maine agencies. This whole process has been questionable from the start. It's been observable in the Zoom meetings on PFAS that some of the major players are very uncomfortable with the damage they're inflicting on the Maine farming community over tests measured in small parts per trillion. Unless these breakdowns in reasonableness are understood, these scams will continue until there are no farmers left. We need an investigation on how this whole mammoth response was implemented based on, I've tried to read as many tests as I can. Pretty much they're inconclusive. They call for more study. That's my first suggestion. Number two, regarding page 26, land purchases, and page 31 of DACF holding and managing land purchases. My written comments say that DCF appears to be getting into the purchase, holding, and sale of land. I may be wrong. Maybe that's already been happening. But for those of us who have studied history, private property is one of the founding principles of this country. In it, the right to private property is one of the the freedom that all other freedoms can be based on. It's very important. So this seems to be in direct violation of the principle, long-held principle of private property by our founding farmers. So if this is done, if the buying and selling of land is going to happen, I can only reflect what I've learned over 10, 15 years. I don't speak, and there's a lot of people in this room that don't understand this. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking bad about particular organizations because most people don't understand it, but I don't believe the land trust should be involved in this process of buying and selling. I don't think that people understand the land trust. My personal feeling, a lot of the old time farmers and old time researchers I've talked to, is that it's a land acquisition arm of international finance. So for pennies on a dollar, they're getting control of land that has taken generations of farmers to build. So I don't believe in getting them involved. Also, if the DACF is going to take care of this, buy and sell without the land trust, there should be stipulations that when this property is resold, that it doesn't go into an easement. The easement is a loss of private property, and it's a founding principle of this country. It's one of the most important reasons that we have our freedoms today. So I'm not a proponent of there's some talk in both of those sections I referenced about easements, and there were some questions in there that people seem to be on the committee seem to be split on whether they would want to do an easement. Remember, a farmer on an easement doesn't own land. Sorry, I've seen a farm go into an easement. The stack of legal work is that thick. So should be a time limit and should specify that the land go back to private Maine citizens, not encumbered with easements, taking the land out of private ownership. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody would like copies, I do have copies of them.
Thank you. Andrew Carpenter?
I'm Andrew Garland from Northern Tilt. We're an environmental consulting firm. We do a lot of work, agricultural work. We've done a fair amount of PFAS testing around the state. I'm also on the PFAS Fund Research Advisory Committee, subcommittee. I'm down here. And my comments are mostly related to the strategies that we came up with. I just feel like it's really important for us to focus on very practical solutions for farms that have been impacted. And I think that the recommendations that we came up with in the RFP process do this, but really for me, the thing that the area that I think we need to focus on more is determining ways to make sure that we can continue to farm land that's been impacted. There's some land that may be too contaminated, but there's a lot of land out there that has been identified as having PFAS that's greater than background levels. And I think it's still good agricultural land that can be farmed, that can be productive, that doesn't need to be taken out of service. And I think we can do this with good, well-funded research. I think we need to be careful not to fund completely academic research, but to have it be very practically oriented. So CDC has started doing some of this in terms of determining what crops are going to take up PFAS at higher rates and what will not. But I really think that we can do some good research as long as it's targeted to just that, to trying to focus on making sure land that we have can still be used productively and safely.
Thank you. Madam Nordell?
Good afternoon, Fund Director Valentine, members of the PFAS Fund Advisory Committee. My name is Adam Nordell. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for your hard work advancing recommendations to get timely and critical assistance to PFAS impacted farmers and other communities through Maine's PFAS Fund. As a campaign manager at Defend Our Health, as a PFAS impacted farmer, and as a community member with high level exposure to these chemicals, I've appreciated the opportunity to participate in the land transfer and health subcommittees, which drafted some of the recommendations being considered today. None of these proposals should need to compete with each other for funding. While the $80 million budget is beyond the $60 million currently appropriated, it is also well within the original $100 million fund proposed in last session's LD 2013, which passed both the House and Senate. We shouldn't shortchange our response to this crisis. To Governor Mills and the Maine legislature, I would request that we appropriate additional funds to ensure that these proposals are all funded in full. We're not asking for the moon. We're only asking to fix what has been broken. Until that additional appropriation is made, I ask those of you serving on the advisory committee to prioritize direct aid to impacted communities. PFAS impacted Maine residents are living with the costs of the state's past regulatory failure, and they need to be first in line. Farmers have clearly been impacted to a devastating degree and should receive prompt aid to help keep them and their businesses, help keep their businesses afloat, and or to help them move on if their land and or irrigation water is too contaminated to farm. The state needs to provide a way forward or a way out for all PFAS impacted farmers. For those of us who've been directly exposed to these chemicals, it will take decades to get them out of our systems. What could go wrong in that time? The group of people living with exposure includes impacted farmers, their family members, and others living on the farm. It includes farm workers. It includes non-farmers whose wells have been poisoned. It includes people who live in impacted communities and have eaten farm products or fish and game that have been contaminated as a result of the sludge spreading. We need to prioritize meaningful health-related aid to all of these communities to keep the fund equitable and to keep the fund consistent with the language and spirit of LD 2013. I would especially request that you fund the proposal to launch a medical study into a technique that would rid the body of chemicals faster. The proposal to facilitate blood serum test access. The proposal to offer medical monitoring to impacted communities and to offer mental health supports. Please also make special note of the proposal that Maine should cover the cost of any treatment for PFAS-linked illnesses. It would be terrible if these costs fall on the impacted communities. State-funded healthcare coverage would be a tiny step towards justice for those of us exposed. The health-related proposals would only consume 12% of the appropriated $60 million budget, and only 9% of the total, only 9% of the proposed 80 million currently under consideration. As you get into the weeds making any budget decisions over the use of this fund, please remember that the entire conversation about PFAS stems from concerns over the health impacts of these chemicals. This is not a place we can afford to cut any corners. Thank you so much for all of your time and hard work.
Thank you. Next down. Please stay seated.
Sorry, I can stand there. I think. Anyway, on my bucket, there we go. Good afternoon, and thank you all people. My name is Fred Stone, and I am probably the reason that a lot of people are here. Again, our nightmare started on November 3rd of 16, and I won't get into the weeds. It's probably things most everybody has understood or knows going on right now. The concerns that I have about the committee's work and what has happened here, I think probably we would go with the land buyout thing, and that maybe some of those concerns probably could be addressed in rulemaking. I would rather see a type of conservation easement, or I shouldn't say conservation easement, where I'd be banned from utilizing our land for agricultural uses after, as opposed to an outright buyout of our property. Our farm was purchased by my grandfather in 1914. My wife has a few attachments to it, as long as it is, so do I. So as far as selling it to the state or anybody else, I think we might have a few problems with that. As far as the rest of it is concerned, I applaud the committee for the work that has been handled. I think if I was going to make another comment, I think the speed of getting the relief out to some of these farms are extremely important. We're 5 months out, I believe, on our feed bills right now. That stems from the 1st of January on. These issues, I think, can be remedied in a number of different ways, and hopefully they will be, along with the maintenance of our water filtration system. Remember, our system went in online on on May 15th of 17. And it was a gas system. It was a granulated activated charcoal system. I will credit that Maine is at the head of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all this. So I know that we're making up stuff as we go along, and we're pretty much writing the book. And we are the gold standard on what other states are out there looking to do. I will say that for the naysayers out there that want to tell everybody that the health effects that are involved in this thing are made up or may have, overblown, I can assure you that my health issues are very, very real. My Parkinson's is very real. My lymphedema now that we've developed is very real, hence why the cast and almost losing my foot. So those issues are very real. And these health issues are the dairy farm. We have never had any issues of health in both sides of my family and both sides of my wife's family. These things came from someplace. I have no clue where, except to say that it was involved with the contamination from PFAS. And I was going to say, prove, if you don't believe that, then prove that I'm wrong. Again, I want to credit the committees for the work that's been done. We've got a long ways to go. $80 million, I think, is just going to be a drop in the bucket when the time this thing is all done, said and done. The extent of the contamination that goes on in the state of Maine, never mind what's going on in New England or the rest of the country. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve on the subcommittee. And I appreciate, and hopefully we go forward. Yes.
Thank you, Fred. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to speak?
What's that? No.
So we're going to now turn to people who are appearing via Zoom. Haley Emery is up first. Give us just a moment to get connected.
If everyone, would you raise your hand?
No, it's okay. Leslie Forstead, are you online?
It disappeared.
Well, if you raised your hand,
To the top of the list.
might have gone to the top of the list. Yep.
Hi there. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm a panelist. Great, thank you. My name is Leslie Forstad. I'm a human development specialist and an extension professor with the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. And over the last year, I've worked with a team from DACF, UMaine Extension, and a number of community partners to administer the Maine Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. This is funding that was provided by the USDA. And all of the funds were used to support farmer and farm worker mental health and well-being. And part of the funds went directly to PFAS-affected farmers to receive counseling, healthcare, and other wellness activities. The Maine Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network was a one-time funded program through COVID relief funds. So in the draft strategies, under the health section, strategy 4.f states providing mental health support. The PFAS funds could be used to seed the establishment of a permanent state-funded program. It would initially focus on those affected by PFAS. It would be a state-funded program like Vermont Farm First, which offers, or it could be like Vermont Farm First, which offers an employee assistance-like program for farmers. And that would begin with PFAS-affected farmers and over time move to universal access for all farmers. So I can't emphasize how important mental health and well-being is in consideration in all of this work that you're doing. On a good day, farmers are stressed and many could benefit from mental health counseling and behavioral health supports. And then this addition of PFAS to the mix. An EAP-like program would help farmers work with navigators and they would have access to counseling, referrals for healthcare, and other preventative and intervention efforts. Services like this are sometimes born out of crisis. And the story from Vermont is that it was the dairy crisis that established their EAP program for farmers. And here we are in a state of crisis with PFAS in Maine. I hope that this could be a springboard for wellness and mental health with these PFAS funds and programming to include these implementation strategies that you've drafted. We know at Extension that ongoing mental health resources like this are welcome and embraced by the farming community. And there was a recent piece in the Portland Press Herald that I'll submit written testimony with a link to that just emphasizes again why we need to support farmer mental well-being in addition to, of course, all the health and land and all the pieces that you're recommending here. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in Zoom who would like to speak? And what's the best way? Should they raise their hand? I don't know.
Hi, I don't know. This is Heather Spalding. I don't know if you were waiting for me. I was having trouble with my connection, but I'm actually just outside the building. So if there's anyone else, I can run in and be there in person with you, or I could just talk now. I don't know how many more people you have.
There was one other person, so why don't you come in and take your time.
Okay, thanks so much. I'll be right there. Thanks.
Oh, no, she's.
So Isabel, you'll be next.
Next is in now. Sorry.
Yep, whenever you're ready.
Sorry, I thought you meant next after the person who was coming into the room. I just have a couple of just brief things to say. My name is Izzy Ruffin, and I'm here today both as a farm worker and an agricultural service provider. I've spent the last I think 15 or 16 months or so as a grant manager for the Maine Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, also known as Maine FARSAN. The program supports farmers, farm workers, and agricultural service providers of land, forest, and sea with efforts to cultivate wellness and build resilience. The majority of our work is centered around mental health and well-being. And this past, I believe it was March, I participated in a few sessions with the subcommittee to help inform the health and mental health responses included on the draft plan. In the past year, I worked with Bo Dennis of MOFGA to administer the Maine PFAS Farmer Wellness Fund and saw firsthand the benefits of that program, which provided $500 to PFAS affected farmers and farm workers for their wellness needs. $500 does not seem like a lot, and this program, this draft plan certainly has a lot more funding to offer. But participants of that program utilize the funds for things like therapy, childcare, acupuncture, traditional healers, transportation assistance, uncontaminated water and food, etc. The beauty of the program is that farmers had the autonomy to define what wellness looked like for them. And I am in support of that same autonomy across this draft plan, both in the mental health response and the health response. And then, oh, sorry, lost my train of thought, just across the board, letting farmers sort of be part of guiding the response as much as possible, and making sure that their voices are heard, and utilizing simplicity, autonomy, and creating accessibility whenever and wherever possible, and to just consider who might be left out of each response, especially for farm workers, Indigenous growers, or other folks on small non-commercial land, and to consider how either in this first draft or moving forward, how more folks can be included in the response. And I also wanted to second Leslie's pitch for the EAP model, because it's really just a wonderful model, and could see it going very far in Maine for farmers and farm workers. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Izzy. Is there anybody else on Zoom who would like to speak? Okay, not seeing anyone. So Heather has arrived in the room. So if you're ready, go ahead.
Sure, thank you so much. And I did hear everything except for the last, just about a minute I missed, but I'm sorry I'm late to begin here in person with you. So my name is Heather Spalding, and I am Deputy Director of Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, MOFGA. Really grateful to have the opportunity to share some brief comments on this plan. And on behalf of our roughly 15,000 members and 523 certified organic farms and processing operations, we want to extend our deepest appreciation for the incredible effort of this advisory fund, this advisory committee, and the associated subcommittees. We feel that this is a comprehensive, a thoughtful, and a visionary undertaking that succinctly explains the history and the known impacts of sludge spreading on Maine farmland, while laying out an aggressive and resourceful plan to mitigate the adverse effects of PFAS, keep Maine farmers farming, and support the long-term health of farm families exposed to PFAS. Every section of this report represents an enormous amount of analysis, and we also appreciate the acknowledgement of limitations, the financial, the capacity, the research, community engagement, and more. But we feel that in addition to providing excellent strategy recommendations, this report lists many needs for addressing the broader PFAS challenges in Maine. And the legislature and the Mills administration can take this up in future budgeting efforts. Generally, we'd like to say that we've been honored to participate in the research and the finance and business support subcommittees. Over the past years, we've worked closely with the state agencies, Maine Farmland Trust, and our Health, the University of Maine System, many other organizations, and of course, the many impacted farmers who are struggling and who bravely step forward to share their stories that really got this whole effort going. We are going to submit detailed comments, but I just wanted to share a few high-level observations. Across the board, we're really hoping for concrete, actionable plans that spell out how to manage the programs equitably. We want to ensure equal access to services and want to ensure that the program participants, staff, and contractors are compensated equitably for their labor and time. We recognize that sometimes there's no perfect or good answer to a problem, but Maine will have to make some difficult decisions nonetheless and try to opt for the maximum reduction of harm, knowing that we very possibly might make a bad decision. We have to do our best and correct any mistakes as they come. We don't know how many farmers are going to be impacted, so much of this is theoretical. The draft report is already $20 million over budget. Of course, we hope to get additional funding through various channels, but we'll very likely have to prioritize and make some cuts in the short term. This means that we must have transparency and full community engagement in the process. Maine is the model for the rest of the country, and the more of the process that we do publicly, the better it will be for neighboring states who are just starting to put plans in place. Regarding direct support for farmers, we'd like to stress the importance of making the plans easily navigable for farmers. A big part of successful navigation is having staff ready, willing, and able to support farmers as soon as possible. We encourage hiring contractors from the established network of technical assistance providers, in addition to hiring through the formal processes of state government. Another important aspect of navigability is ensuring that the systems are as administratively simple as possible. Farmers already are dealing with so much stress, and having to fill out complicated form after complicated form will be a disincentive to engagement. We hope that these systems will be set up so that whatever door someone enters will lead to answers to all of their questions. The report alludes to evolving health guidance from the federal government, and we want to ensure that Maine's program is nimble enough to keep pace. This will likely mean that more farms may become eligible for services, which of course will demand more funding. We appreciate and share the desire to ensure a seamless transition from MOFGA and MFT's Emergency Relief Fund to the state's fund. At the same time, we're committed to maintaining and strengthening our well-established relationships among stakeholders, and we want to continue collaboration. Collaboration is the name of the game for success of these programs. All of the organizations mentioned in the report show that there's been an incredible array of constructively engaged stakeholders. This allows us to serve the breadth of farms in Maine and ensure that no farm is lost along the way. Regarding land purchases, we hope that sale or lease of land held by the department could replenish the PFAS fund or go toward farmland preservation, or other programs to keep farming viable. DACF's evaluation of prohibited uses for the land it holds should protect public health, not only the food supply. DACF is repurposing land, as DACF is repurposing land for other uses, for example, solar. It should ensure the involvement of abutters and neighbors in addition to consulting with municipalities and consider potential exposure pathway created from land use management choices and changes. Regarding research, our overarching recommendation is that at a minimum, the research is farmer informed and affected farmers are compensated to be part of the review panel to ensure that their perspectives are considered. We want to give preference for Maine-based research. Research priorities should be inclusive and should specifically address impacts and outcomes for BIPOC farmers. It's critical to have transparency around conflicts of interest. The topics that are of utmost concern to us are better understanding plant PFAS uptake and the additive effect of precursors being taken up in addition to their terminal products in plants, livestock, and people. Regarding the health recommendations, we recognize that this effort focuses primarily on impacted farmers. We still want to ensure that residents whose wells are contaminated by nearby sludge spreading will be cared for and eligible for medical and blood testing and health monitoring. Special attention needs to go to sensitive and vulnerable populations like children and immunosuppressed people who've been exposed. And once again, we need to attend to the needs of indigenous populations who rely on wild foodways that are potentially also impacted by the same sources of PFAS contamination. We want to make sure that strategies account for cumulative exposures, dust, pesticides, food, water for families and farm workers. Regarding the public health oversight, we'd like to point out that footnote 15 is inaccurate. The applicable law does not limit public health oversight to people whose high PFAS blood levels are connected to biosolids. The law includes exposure both from agricultural land and from contaminated drinking water from whatever means. We recognize that this report is prioritizing farm families and workers, but that footnote should be corrected. Again, we're committed to collaboration and ensuring transparency and carrying out these strategies. We're pleased to continue our partnership to address PFAS contamination of Maine farmland and to provide prompt, direct, and meaningful support to farmers. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. And I have a copy of the right.
Right. Thank you, everybody. I realized that I forgot to acknowledge Commissioner Amanda Beal, who is a member of the advisory committee, is appearing with us via Zoom today. Did you want to make any comments, Commissioner Beal?
I would just say thank you to everybody who has come today, either via Zoom or in person to share your thoughts. And also thank you to everybody on this advisory committee and everyone who raised their hand and helped out with the subcommittee work. It's just been an incredible lift, but with so many people caring about this issue and caring about this fund and lending their time and their good thinking, I think we've got a draft that we can really be proud of, and appreciate all the comments today once again. So thank you.
So with that, we're at the end of this meeting. Going forward, the next steps, like I said, we will be accepting comments through next Monday, the 19th, 11:45 p.m. I will be working to consolidate all of those comments, sharing them with the subcommittees who will consider the comments, refine their recommendations based on those comments, make their recommendations to the full advisory committee, which meets July 10th. And at that point, again, consider the public comments, the recommendations from the subcommittees, and hopefully finalize the plan, and we can move into the implementation phase. So thank you all.